Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're coming from. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about PCI, and I promise you this is going to be fun. I had a quick chat with the guys before, and it was really interesting, and I can't wait to ask all my questions. I was eager to start, and I asked a few of those. Yeah, let's get started. We'll start with some intros. So again, I'll go from right to left on my screen. So Lee, why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit about yourself? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. Hi guys. Lee Quinton. So I'm a senior security consultant with Trusted Sec. I work alongside Art Cooper there, just below me. I've been a QSA since before the first class. As some of the other guys have as well. We work directly for Visa and MasterCard as QDSPs and the likes on the early programs when version 1.0 was still in its infancy. So yeah, I've been in the payment compliance space for quite a while, probably for every inch of my beard at least. So
cool. Jeff.
Hey, I am Jeff Hall. I work for Truvantis, and I am known as the PCI Guru thanks to my PCI Guru blog. Been doing this way too damn long. I predate everything. I think I did one of the first third-party assessments for Visa back in 2002. So,
wow. Okay, Art. Thank you, Jeff. Art.
Hi, my name's Art Cooper. Everybody calls me Coop. Yeah, I've been around as long as these fellas, and it's kind of like that Godfather thing. And just when I get out, they drag me back in. So, you know, all these years, I'm still here. So hopefully we can provide a little bit of insight today.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a dream team here. Ben.
Hi, good afternoon. Ben Rothke. I'm a senior information security manager with Tapad. Actually, started the PCI DreamTeam, many years ago when I was a QSA and then became an ISA, and now in a corporate role. So I'm actually involved in PCI compliance. So yeah, it's great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And David?
Yes, so my name is David Mundhenk. I'm a principal security consultant with eDelta Consulting, which is based in New York City. I've been here about a year. Before that, I was at the Hertzbeck Group for 6.5 years, doing PCI work, obviously, but also dabbled in some other cybersecurity realms, if you will. Before that, I was at IBM for about 7 years, and I led a PAQSA practice. Excuse me. My esteemed colleagues will tell you that this topic of client-side web browser vulnerabilities has been sort of a splinter in my rump for a long time. I've been evangelizing about it for a long time. I even tried to start a special interest group with the PCI Council. The proposal I sent actually made the short list, but we got beat out anyway. But man, lo and behold, I see that with PCI DSS 4.0, it looks like somebody got the council's attention as it relates to client-side web browser vulnerabilities. I also take credit for inventing the term Mariana Trench of attack surfaces. So I wrote or co-published a paper about 3 years ago with another company on client-side web browser vulnerabilities, and I think that's the first time I've ever heard of or seen that term is when I threw it in here. But I'm very excited to be working with Source Defense because you're going to help bring truth, justice, and stability to hopefully folks trying to deal with and address client-side web browser vulnerabilities as it relates to generally security in general, but also as it relates to the PCI DSS 4.0. And glad to be here.
Thank you very much. I have to say that I share the same mission, hopefully, with what we're doing with security coding, because unfortunately, too many companies develop code and security is treated more like a bug than an actual something that needs to be done from the get-go. Like I usually tell people, you're not gonna live in a house that was built negligently. You want the safety measures to have been put in from the get-go. And unfortunately, when it comes to apps, we're holding, most of us apps, that security is treated like a bug. And only if somebody raises a flag, they will go and fix it. It's so easy, like in so many times, even the biggest, apps, to find XSS and stuff like that. So hopefully,
Absolutely. I've been evangelizing and an AppSec guy for quite some time. When I was at Coalfire, I was on the application validation team, and used to do training on secure coding and whatnot. I also have a pen testing background, and I can say with a great conviction that most application security assessments and pen testers are focused on the server side.
Yeah.
And they would run away screaming with their hair on fire if you ever told them they had to look at the client-side web browser. And so unfortunately, that whole attack surface and that whole paradigm has been ignored up until now. So
yeah,
good stuff.
Oh yeah, there's so much I can talk about here. I'll do that in a second. All those XSS are also not caught usually by the SOC. They run on the client side. It can be out there, invisible to the security team for ages. But before we dive into this, which is something that I'm also very passionate about, let's start with really high level. Let's talk about, first of all, who needs to comply with PCI, and also, how do I know that I need to comply? I'm a startup. Nobody told me about it. I'm writing my code. How do I know that first of all, do I need to comply? And second, who's going to tell me that? So Lee, I think you started at the beginning when we were offline. You were talking a little bit about it. Do you want to start to take this?
Yeah. How do you know if you've got to comply? Well, first and foremost, do you receive, store, process, or transmit cardholder data in any way, shape, or form? Yeah, do you touch cardholder data? Because if you do, you are going to be on the hook for it somewhere along the line. As a merchant, obviously your bank is going to be the ones that will, by this day and age, should already have reached out to you. And even if you're a brand new merchant, they're going to have a PCI pack of some sort to kind of help guide you and at least tell you what your responsibilities are going to be. Where service providers are concerned, that's still obviously it's a little bit more of a moving target because they're more on the hook directly with the card brands themselves, and if they're not working with acquiring banks. But that's typically where you're going to run into it.
So if nobody told me that I need to be PCI compliant, am I good? Am I off the hook? Anyone else who wants to touch this?
No. You are legally liable. Where we typically run into problems are managed security services providers, those sorts of people, and well, anybody that's in managed services. Because if you're managing firewalls and networks, servers, whatever, and you've never had a conversation with the customer about what data they use, whether it's PCI, HIPAA, whatever, you need to know your customer to know that you may or may not be in scope, particularly with PCI data, because if you're touching devices that can potentially come into contact with the PCI data, you're required to be compliant just like that customer.
Right.
And a lot of these managed service providers run around and turn a blind eye and go, until somebody tells me this, I'm not going to do anything. And what happens is, unfortunately, is a breach happens and they end up in a lawsuit and everybody throws up their hands and goes, well, how come nobody told me?
Exactly.
Well, at the end of the day, it wasn't anyone's obligation to tell you. It was your obligation to find out.
So if you were to run a poll, how many MSPs do you think actually reach out to their customers and do exactly what you said?
10% maybe.
So we're in big trouble. So you're saying, so basically right now the situation is that if nobody told me, I'm not going to do this. And
Well,
I will probably
there are a
ping it.
few of us here that
The MSP and say, they didn't tell me, these are my IT guys, so I'm off the hook. But in reality, I'm legally bounded by this.
Yeah,
well,
there's a
go ahead, Ben.
yeah, I mean, there was a famous case in tort law about 75 years ago about a tugboat. To make a long story short, they were found guilty because they didn't follow appropriate due diligence at the time. So in 2024, companies may not know, if you don't know about PCI, they should have someone on your staff that knows about security, overall privacy, data processing, etc. So ignorance is never an excuse. But a company throwing up their hands and says, we didn't know about PCI. They'll be found, derelict. And lawyers, love cases like that because they see dollar signs everywhere. Just one nuanced thing also around PCI. PCI is often called a law, a regulation. It's not. Things to be laws or regulations have to come from Congress or a government agency. PCI is a contract from the card brands. So if someone's non-PCI compliant, they're not going to go to jail, but they're likely going to go out of business.
Gotcha.
But at the end of the day, ignorance is never an excuse. And 2024 security, unless someone's in a cave, judges can have no mercy on them.
Okay, so here is another one. Any one of you. So again, I'm a startup or I'm a merchant, whatever, and I'm using Box. I'm using Stripe. So I'm like, yeah, of course I'm swiping cards, but it's not me. That's why I have Stripe. They're my service provider for processing cards. Like, do I even need to care about PCI?
Well, let's talk about Square real quick,
Yeah.
because it's still referred to as Square, even though the parent company is Box.
Yeah.
So Square is in an interesting relationship with one particular card brand, and that's Visa, because Visa is the largest investor
Right.
in Square. So Square really is small merchants, very, very small level 4 merchants. And Square doesn't push compliance down on those folks because at the end of the day, they're relying on the technology that Square provides. And so as a result, Square sits as the point of recourse if a breach occurs, because if a breach occurs, it's that hairdresser, or
Right.
it's the woman or man selling art at the art fair. And so they're relying upon Square to produce a secure point of sale solution to make that all happen. So, and the same is true for a lot of these other providers in a similar position. Where that changes is when you get into, we're operating a website and we're doing more than 22,000 transactions annually on that website. Now it becomes more of a compliance issue. And in those cases, banks are going to come out and say, yo, you need to be PCI compliant.
So you're saying that, so here is my guess why this is happening, right? I have a form on my website, I'm using Stripe, but because it's coming from my website, again, there can be an XSS, there can be a keylogger somebody injected, or all of those things that they can basically, yes, I'm not processing it, but the page that I'm hosting, I used an iframe, I didn't implement it in the right way, and now they can sort of like keylog all the credit card information. So basically, if you have a website and you have a credit card form, doesn't matter who's processing it. I guess you have to be, your checkout page needs to be secure.
Right.
That's sort of the question is Stripe telling it to anyone? Like, because I go in, I put in Stripe, like they're supposed to tell me, hey, you should do it in this manner, otherwise you're not compliant. Are they doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
If you sign a contract with Stripe, you're going to set up a merchant ID. That merchant ID is going to be tied to a bank. The bank is going to send you a packet of work. And in that packet is going to be MasterCard and Visa's rules of operation. And you're supposed to read that 800-page tome from each of them and understand everything that's in there and all your obligations. And if you're not up to speed on that, shame on you.
So you may have received it. So a lot of people, a lot of companies may have received that pack and then just shelved it somewhere, and they're not even aware that they need to comply with PCI.
And this is part of the problem. It's the CFO that signs that packet.
Gotcha.
And he may not, I'll guarantee you, he didn't communicate anything to developers, IT, anybody else. He just signed it because, hey, we want to be in business.
Right.
There's a lot of fine print in those contracts too, so he might not even read the whole thing.
I think an important point also is you can outsource responsibility. You could never outsource liability.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, they're going to be coming for you. The fact that you had a third party, an MSP, et cetera, it's you as the vendor who are going to have to deal with the liability. And with all the cloud providers make it eminently clear. They have responsibilities matrices, and they say what they'll do and what you have to do. But no one reads the manuals, so that's why. That's why the QSAs are working overtime.
Yeah. What I'm hearing from you guys is most businesses are not PCI compliant. That's what it sounds like. If
Well,
MSPs,
I mean, what I would say is no one is compliant 100% of the time.
Okay.
There are a lot of organizations out there that are close to it. They're Six Sigma compliant.
Okay.
Most merchants who have gone to P2PE and tokenization, they're not going to be a problem.
Gotcha.
I mean, will they get breached? Sure. Is any cardholder data going to get released? No.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's not the problem. It's the banks and the service providers now that are the real risk, because those people, for the most part, have no choice but to take on the data. That's their job. That's what they're paid for.
Gotcha. Another question, and then we'll move on to a few other things about what's the difference in the PCI 4 and stuff like that. But so if I'm SOC 2 compliant, for example, how far, again, I'm a startup. I went through this process. I paid a lot of money to be SOC 2. Now they're telling me PCI, and I'm like,
good
yeah,
for you.
I'm good. So yeah, you were laughing. Do you want to say anything about it?
So what?
Well,
under the PCI Council's rules,
guidelines. I did it by the NIST. I followed the NIST or whatever framework,
hey,
and
Rob,
I'm secured.
No.
Why not?
Not according to PCI.
Okay.
Let's go back to your SOC 2 example, because I'm a recovering CPA. I worked for almost 30 years in the CPA industry. Did a lot of SOC 2s and SAS 70s before that. Yes, there is a lot of coverage there, but I can tell you, you sit through a SOC 2 meeting and everybody gets up after 40 minutes thinking it's done, and me as the QSA goes, no. Sit your butts down. We got another hour's worth of work, because my level of detail is tremendously deeper than what the SOC 2 people are looking for. tremendously. We're going to talk about things that the SOC 2 auditors can't even discuss because they don't have the qualifications nor the technical wherewithal to understand what I'm going to ask you. And then you start down the road of talking about firewall configs. Why are certain ports open? How often do you review this stuff? What is outbound versus inbound? I mean, the level of detail inside PCI is tremendously deeper than most any other security framework around.
I love that. So this leads me to another question that I think I know what you're going to answer. If I don't need to comply with PCI, is it worthwhile trying to follow it and comply with it? Is there any, basically to rephrase it, is it worth it if I don't need to comply with PCI?
Yes.
Gaby, can I go back 30 seconds? I just went to that SOC 2 question. SOC 2 is a report card. And, you know, sometimes report cards are all A's and sometimes report cards are all F's. And there's two things. You have to read that SOC report, A, and B, strictly speaking, you could construct a SOC report that says we have no security, we don't care about security, and we only hire people who are clueless. You're not going to get an AICPA firm to sign off on that, but you can have a SOC report saying we hate SOC, we hate security, and we are going to make your data public. So companies are going to see, hey, you know, we've got this SOC 2 emblem, we have this SOC 2 report. Since they never read it, that report is stating, you know, we don't care about security. So that's sort of the, you know, people think a SOC 2 report means they take security seriously and do a good job. As I said, it's a report card. Hopefully it's going to be like Lee's report card, that the person's really smart. More often than not, you know, the report card is not always so pretty.
Gotcha.
And getting back to your question, Gabriel, I currently have a client right now who has like a extremely remote possibility, because of the nature of their business, that they could come into contact with cardholder data. But it's extremely remote, but they're still kind of concerned about it, but they're also a service provider to their customers. And so their philosophy is, we're going to go ahead and go through these assessments for all this stuff, because it's PCI DSS is a very good metric, if you will, to ensure that the right things are being done. Now they're doing SOC 2 and other stuff, but you know, I was kind of stunned because they're spending quite a bit of money on PCI assessment, but they find some value in that. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
I mean, as security baselines go, it's very solid. You know, the 12 domains, those 12 requirements cover pretty much everything that you are going to see out there, be it with the NIST TSF, some of the more niche aspects of things like CMMC and things like that. There's overlap, obviously, with all of the frameworks. This is why we have traceability matrices that overlap and show us what controls apply to different frameworks and different standards. But I think, as I was saying before we started, one of the things I've always really appreciated about PCI is that it is prescriptive. It does tell you ABC, X, Y, and Z, what you need to do for each of these controls. And there's a lot of guidance out there. There's a lot of material that's been generated by the community over the years, and Jeff's blog being one of them. And then obviously the guy's book for specifically for version 4. So there is, you know, there's a lot of help out there for people to use it. So just because you don't accept credit card data anywhere in your environment, or it's not what your business model is, doesn't mean it can't serve you as a really good stepping stone into maintaining a good baseline of security throughout your organization.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't matter if it's PCI data or not, it's data, right? So if you follow those security best practices, you're just better off. It can be PII, it can be anything.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that it's specific really helps somebody that actually doesn't know a lot just to like follow and not guess. Go ahead.
I just gave a presentation to the local ISACA chapter back in November, walking them through why the DSS and these secure SDLC standards are probably the best security standards to follow for securing any kind of sensitive data, because it is prescriptive. It does tell you how to architect an environment to protect information, and then, oh, by the way, how you go back and assess it to make sure it's working.
So the council with PCI 4 said, you are more flexible now and you can do some customized stuff. So what's happening here? You know, we're talking here about how detailed it is and it's all great. And now what are we like shifting to a point where we're starting to be a little bit more abstract?
Well, the big wrinkle there with the customized approach was everybody got all hot and heavy about the password standard in NIST 863B, and oh, we don't have to change passwords every 90 days, and they can be shorter than 15 characters, and blah 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 blah. And so, oh, we've got to have a way to accept this. Okay, so the council came back and they came up with this thing called the customized approach. And yeah, hey, yay rah, that's all good and whatnot. And let's go ahead and do this. Well, I'm working on a 4.0 ROC at the moment. We're not doing a customized approach, but we talked it through. And that discussion basically opened my eyes to understand this is not a walk in the park. That flexibility comes at actually a pretty decent cost, both in time and dollars to make it work. And the discussion did happen to be on 63B. And I can tell you that it's probably going to add in the neighborhood of 75% or up to an organization's time and cost to get it done, both in my own time as a QSA and in their time to prep for it to make sure that it works right. So yeah, you get flexibility, but you better have damn good justification to your management as to why you're going down that road. Because it ain't cheap.
More a liability than anything, right? It's not like
if you're a large organization that's got mature processes, experienced people, you've got well-tuned tools in your environment, but you're meeting the intent of that defined control in a different manner, then the customized approach is really that's really where it should fit for those organizations. If you don't have those things in place, then you're far better off trying to architect something that's going to meet the defined control. And we all appreciate PCI is based on people, process, and technology, first and foremost. So hitting the numbers on those defined controls will be easier than trying to come up with something new that will fit the customized approach, just because maybe you don't think that the defined control is going to work well for you. If you don't already have something in place that's meeting that intent, as Jeff said, it's going to be difficult to achieve it. You're going to have to provide a lot of justification for why you're not going to not capable of meeting the defined approach, and it's going to increase the cost of the assessment and potentially running costs for business as usual.
So at least put its finger on an interesting point. There's the rub. If you're going to go with a customized approach for any given control, you have to do what's known as a targeted risk assessment. So you have to do empirical validation that the control that you propose is going to provide equal to or better than protection than the original requirement. And it has to be a very detailed, logical approach. It has to be heavily documented. And for QSAs, I can see that we already had some challenges with the compensating control worksheet stuff, where you get into these I call them network family feuds, where, you know, basically it's very contentious, and our clients and customers are going to insist that what they have in place is providing equal to or better than protection. But at the end of the day, the final arbiter is the QSA and the QSA firm.
So staying big picture, beside that customized approach and flexibility, what other big changes are in PCI 4?
Well, a good one that you pointed out earlier is your firm that does the iframe and this, that, and the other thing. And hey, I've got this small little scope because I only have to deal with SAQA. One of the big things that's going to bite a lot of those firms doing online with SAQA is now you're going to have to do ASV scanning. Because that's the problem. And as David has attested time and again, a lot of these companies that went with SAQA did it because they thought it got their skin out of the game. You know, they could run a garbage website and no big deal because everything's in an iframe, not my fault.
Yeah.
And that's not true, because at the end of the day, if your little junky website that's running the iframe gets breached, and now instead of going to whomever, now it's going to Joe Schmo in Eastern Europe, and then it goes to the other guy and they're skimming the data off you, that's on you. It's not on your bank. That's your organization's fault, and you're going to get sued 6 ways to Sunday for being the schmuck.
So who's going to tell you that? Here, we had enough problem with the MSPs, the things that they should be able to talk to their customers. Now we're going into the world of XSS and stuff like that. We're talking about, you know, things that many MSPs and IT guys, you know, don't necessarily go into. So like, who's going to raise that flag and tell the company, you know, your R&D needs to like do better coding?
Well, usually it's a bank or law enforcement that shows up and says, yo, hey, you're leaking data 6 ways to Sunday, and you need to fix that. And then it becomes the fire drill to figure out, one, where it's happening, how it's happening, and then how do you fix it?
Yeah. So
I think it's also important to understand, I mean, nothing in PCI is, should we say, leading edge security. You know, everything in it is basic, you know, best practices, you know, good security for 2024. I mean, there's, you know, it may be expensive, it may be costly, it may be a hassle, but, you know, nothing is in it that is basic, you know, information security, privacy, data security, due diligence.
yeah, but you know, I'm a startup, right? We've launched it, we just built the functionality, we want to put it out there, we want to start accepting online orders. Like, who thinks about it? You know, I don't even have an MSP yet. You know, we're a 10 people company. We have our developers are doing DevOps, and you know, we're running everything on the cloud. Who's gonna come to tell us that we need to do this? Like the R&D manager, it's not like PCI is a thing that they're, you know, even like eager to go and learn.
Well,
I mean, you could even say it's like, you know, we're a 10-person startup. Who should tell us, you know, we can't send racist emails, and harass our coworkers? Is, you know, the person in HR should know that, and so too your IT person, you know, needs to know about PCI. As I said, that's, you know,
and
that's
the
due
bank
diligence
is
2024.
the bank
You
is
think
going to
these
tell you
may
because of
tell
your
us
app.
something? Go ahead, sorry.
The bank is going to tell you because of your app.
Yeah.
Because they're going to say, show me your paperwork that shows you're PCI compliant.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But you know, they can say, look, we review our code. Our coders are 20 years experience. And here is the thing, a lot of the developers don't understand that they don't know how to code in a secure manner. So they're under this perception that they've done an amazing job because they have hashed the password and it's stored securely in the database. So when they have to answer the question, are you secure? They go, yeah, sure. Who's going to test it? Like, who's going to tell them, no, you're not. You didn't do a pen test.
So Gabriel, there's a difference between security and compliance. They are interrelated, but you can be secure but not compliant, and vice versa. So I think there's some confusion about that, amongst IT people and developers. Secondly, hopefully the people developing apps have a extensive software development lifecycle that builds security into all aspects of that lifecycle. So you would think if they're focused on security, they may not have heard of PCI, but it's like Jeff said, as soon as you hook that up, start asking your bank to process transactions, they're going to say, well, wait a minute, time out, show us your attestation of compliance. So that's sort of the gate, security gate or quality gate, I think.
And I think by 2024, to be frank, if you've got an experienced developer that has ever touched payment card flows anywhere, they've heard of PCI, even if they've not been the one that's been responsible for actually dealing with it.
Right.
And as Jeff said, as soon as you're going to want to try and connect up your application to a processor, that processor is going to be pushing back on you to some degree. And because the bank, when you set up that merchant ID, is going to send you that big packet of op regs. And early on in there is going to be requirements around PCI. The account rep is likely going to talk to you about PCI anyway. I mean, if you're a merchant, if you're a level 4 merchant, as Jeff said, you're processing less than 22,000 transactions a year of a given brand. It may not be high up on their agenda for talking to you, because they've got may have larger clients or are processing more data that they are having to bear down on a little bit harder. But I think in this day and age, it's when we look at the fact that for quite some time now, you think like the number 1, number 2 consumer concerns have been identity theft and credit card fraud. Every one of us at some point, probably in the last 15 years, has had it happen to them. Yep. We've all had the email or the phone call from the bank saying your card's been stopped because it's been picked up in a common point of purchase somewhere in the world, where they knew, well, no way did they process this transaction. We've seen velocity checking that says they process a transaction at this local store, and then all of a sudden that same card is being used 20 minutes later, 6,000 miles away locally. It's so those kinds of things are people are, I think, generally a little bit more aware of it now.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, anyone who's used Facebook, I think Facebook has turned into a cesspool of credit card fraud. I mean, and they don't care about it because they're making money off the ads. But if you learn anything from PCI is always have a spare credit card for online purchases, because it's invariable. It's not only are they going to not breach, a lot of these businesses on Facebook exist just for identity theft.
So to tie this a little bit back to what we started, David, and we were touched at the beginning, and you spoke about client-side vulnerabilities.
Right.
What do you think are like the minimum, or what? Forget about the minimum. What would you want in a perfect world that will happen for dev teams to address this client-side vulnerabilities?
Right. So you asked earlier what's different and what's new about 4.0. A couple of things that are new are 6.3.4, which deals with client-side JavaScript and that kind of thing, and 11.3.1 has to do with making sure people can't monkey with the headers of a HTTP request. and redirect stuff. So once again, the traditional application security stuff doesn't focus on the client side, and for good reason up to this point, and pen testing does not as well. But if you look at the requirements of 6.3.4,
643.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they actually have some good guidance in there about,
Very.
You need to have like an inventory of all your scripts. You need to do some sort of risk assessment about the scripts. You should have some business justification for the scripts. And since this kind of architecture is so dynamic, it's not a one-shot deal. Anytime there's a change introduced to the server, you're going to have to go back or the architecture, you're going to have to go back and go through that laundry list again. Once again, the challenge has been up to this point is it's really been tough to get visibility into the client-side web browser. So that's really, I think, going to be the rub for development teams. So because you have this laundry list of here's best practices. Okay, how do we do that? Okay. So a quick question, like the folks at Wizer, are you offering any kind of training around client-side web browser stuff or any kind of application security training?
Exactly, yeah. We have a whole, we have a whole solution for secure coding, which is the training, and we have labs, and we have CTFs, basically, CTF for developers, which is really cool because the way we look at this is that developers are I'm a developer in my past. I've developed for many, many years, and we think like builders, not like breakers. So you can be 20 years into development, but you understand the plumbing. You usually don't understand the framework, like anything above the things you use. And a lot of the hacking goes in over there, prototype pollution and all of those things that we're not going to jump in now, but they touch with the framework because people are not just aware of it, and they have no chance of understanding those things by themselves. Secure coding is not a skill that is based on just years that you've been developed. You can be a developer for 20 years and you can know almost nothing about secure coding because you haven't learned it. It doesn't come with experience. It's something that you have to actually learn to do. And unfortunately, and I see that in the CTFs we do. Sorry that I'm touching this a little bit, but I think it's really interesting because when we launch those CTFs, for those that don't know what CTFs are, like challenges where you get to like hack. Usually it's a server. We give them to hack a short piece of code, and we rank them, from 1 pepper to like 4 peppers. And we had to like lower the level more and more and more for developers because they couldn't even do level 1. It was so hard. They just didn't see it. They knew where the problem is. They didn't know how to exploit it. They didn't understand how to use it. Anyways, we also created and we did it. And this is the reason why we're doing this. This is how it started. Let's do this PCI webinar because I actually loved when I saw the PCI 4 and I saw the guidelines for the developer section. I was like, if people follow this, that would be amazing. There are some things that I thought, are, like you can use the web application firewall and you'll be good. I think, I wouldn't say that a web application firewall.
But this is no different than what we see with security people. I mean, years ago, I hacked a bank doing privileged escalation and nothing but probably 15, 16 low-level vulnerabilities. And it's all because people focus on CVSS scores of 4.0 and greater because they're great. Not only that, 95% of all vulnerabilities have a CVSS score greater than 4. But what people forget, even in the security world, is that even those low-level things, they're vulnerabilities. They're still vulnerabilities. And so people don't understand how they can be chained together to get you in and then create a privileged escalation on a box somewhere away from something. But once you have that privilege, bing, bang, boom, whoa, you're in and you're an admin and game is over. And people, the security guy was sitting next to me when I did it, and he said, how did you do that? And I said, well, you do this, you leverage this, you do this. I got privileged escalation on this box. That gave me access to this. I looked around, I installed this, blah, 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 and boom, I'm in.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. And the problem is a lot of security people do not understand how those things can get chained together and then create such a damn problem.
It's most of the times are things changed together, and that's my problem also with scanners. They're very,
Oh,
they're looking at lines of code, and you don't understand that low vulnerability chained with something else will get you, remote code execution. So yeah, you leak the company ID. What can you do with the company ID? It's a low vulnerability. Oh, you take the company ID and you put into a different API. And people don't understand that. So those scanners are very limited. And so, when I read the PCI documents, I said, okay, people do this. This is great because at least it includes, train your people how to write secure code. And there's some other stuff as well. Again, some of the things I thought they were a little bit, too optimistic, thinking that you can use automated tools to but again, that's sort of the compliance versus security that we need to understand. I think it's an amazing start.
Fantastic. AI is great, but it doesn't understand context.
Yeah.
Not at this point. So
yeah. But I think if people do follow, and that's what I love about the PCI, and the more I learned about it and got in, and I get exactly what you guys are saying. It's very specific, and I think it covers development. I don't know if other compliances cover it to that level, and I think this is relatively deep, and the benefit of following that, for the developers, I didn't see a lot of other compliances that.
You should take a look at the secure SLC standard they created. It's their first standard they created where, it was created for PCI, but really at the end of the day, you can toss that sucker to any sensitive information and it's going to give you great guidance as to how to develop secure code.
So Gaby, how many breaches
framework?
I'm sorry, I've been pretty quiet this whole seminar. I lost a really good friend last night, folks. I apologize for my abject silence here. Anyway, Gaby, how many breaches do you think we used to have back in 1999 or 2000 compared to today? You're going to not like the answer probably, but what do you think? Was there more breaching back then, or is there more breaching now?
Well, I would say there's more now, people.
And that's 100% wrong. Because
really?
That's right. Do you know why there was way more breaching and hacking going on in the late 90s?
Why?
The hacking community was cool then. We used to have websites where these guys would literally go out and hack boatloads of credit cards, but they wouldn't post the data. They would boast about the hack and they'd paste in 2 lines and say, look at this. These guys are idiots. I destroyed them and I have all their data. Ha 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 ha. Okay, the difference is that hackers back then didn't do things to make money off the breaches. Yeah. And until California passed SB 1386, which was a law that said if you have been breached and you do business with anyone in California, you have to tell them. As soon as that law was passed, and I believe it was, 2000 or something, doesn't matter. As soon as that law was passed, all of a sudden we started finding out about everything, because if you were selling rubber baby buggy bumpers on the internet, somebody in California bought one. And so you had to tell the world because you had customers in California. So as the breaches started to get released, more and more states, more and more governments, okay, the Europeans came out with all kinds of breach law. And now you only think there's more because we see them all the time. You're a pretty young fella, but go into a bar in circa 1992, and there was always a huge sign on the wall that said, "We don't take American Express." Everybody always assumed that was because it was expensive. Well, they cost a little more. They were a closed loop system, 100% back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, each transaction on Amex was a little more. But you want to know the real reason the bar didn't take Amex? They used to stick the paper receipts on the thing that had a pokey pole. Everybody's credit card was right at the cash register when you were getting your candy to leave the restaurant to clean your palate. All you had to do was grab 7 or 8 of those, and you had some nice credit card numbers to use over the weekend to go buy TVs or whatever. And this is what was going on constantly. And so Amex had the best fraud management on the planet. Why wouldn't they? They issued the card, they acquired the transaction, they start seeing a bunch of bad transactions, they can narrow it in very quickly that it was Joe's Bar, Grill, and Shrimpery. And so they would shut them down. That's why they didn't take Amex, because one day their credit card machine stopped taking Amex. They couldn't figure out how to fix it, so they put a sign up. We don't take Amex. There was breach. It was the wild, wild west. I've been around this stuff way back, and it was the wild, wild west. PCI, my friend, has saved the credit card business.
Yep.
Absolutely 100%. It has saved the payment card business.
Well,
And if it didn't come along when it did, I think we'd be in a big mess now.
to add on to Coop's Amex statement, it's what I use online exclusively. And the reason why, I have an Amex card that I use only online. They know quicker than I do that fraud has occurred. And the only reason I know is I get a new blue card in the mail next day saying, yeah, you got breached. Here's your new card. You need to update everybody because your old one we shut off.
Well, you think when was the last time you heard of a major breach?
That's right.
I mean, 6 months ago, we were on a call with MasterCard.
A major payment card breach. That's the point to make. It's these other breaches are BS. Right.
And they said to us on the call, it had been 18 months was the last time that they had seen a large payment card breach. So that's now 2 years ago.
That's
the focus,
right.
the emphasis has shifted.
That's right.
And it's web. It's all moving to cards.
It's all moving to the web because all of us QSAs, myself, I was an evangelical for point-to-point and end-to-end encryption for the merchant devices. And I'm still sort of a semi-priest about it because the bottom line is every client that I have that's a merchant, from day one, I kept telling them, you do not need this cardholder data.
Yep.
Do not convince yourself that you do. Your bloody CRM needs and all of that other crap can be handled by Salesforce or somebody else. Get this data out of your network. And the merchants listened. And so when you are putting your card into one of those devices, as long as there's no skim on it, or somebody doesn't skim it in their hands before it goes into the device, which is always going to be a problem. So you have to always look out for skimmers. But the point is, these devices literally cannot be tampered with to provide any usable data to these kids. And it's so funny when I see them grab one and run because they cut off, and it makes me laugh. It's just so stupid. But that's
So guys,
why
we have a few questions from the audience, and we don't have a lot of time. I want to try. Some of them are a little bit too technical, but let's hit just a few. So is web client side, the payment page, part of the CDE scope? And you know what? I'll combine it with another one, which is sort of is the whole website basically needs to be compliant, or just the payment page?
So the answer to the first question is yes, in 2025.
Okay.
It's not currently. They gave everybody some grace period to try to get their hands around this and fix this, but the train is coming. So either get on the train or get run over by it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Regarding the whole website,
Your answer to the whole website, Gaby, depends.
Yeah.
What all of us recommend to people is if you're going to take payments on the web, isolate that code away from the rest of your website so that is the only piece that has to be compliant. Most people have gotten that message and have taken that to heart and done it. But there are still a lot of organizations that still have it embedded. And then, yes, everything's in scope then if they have not isolated it away.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so that's why I think it's a good idea to talk to guys like you, by the way, because doing it right will reduce the cost significantly later on. One more question regarding the developer parts. So regarding script inventory, things like script integrity and stuff like that. How are the QSAs going to audit this? Like,
Good question. There are some open source stuff, but what we're going to ask, at least what I'm going to do, is ask my clients. You got to produce the documentation.
yeah.
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'd want to see from that payment page for script integrity anyway. What are they doing to validate that the page hasn't been tampered with? Are they using sub-resource integrity or something like SRI? And then where is that iframe being loaded from? Is there a content security policy that's enforcing where it can be pulled from into the iframe? But then, I mean, when we talk about larger builds, if we're looking at these large gamified shopping experiences where there are dynamic pages going all over the place, I'd probably be expecting to see those types of people using a tool or
So
something.
the other aspect of this, as it relates to inventory and scripts, most developers are going to just focus on the ones that they develop. What they have to realize is their marketing department is going to shove this stuff at them and say, you need to put this in with the code so that we can get telemetry on user experience and gather intelligence for the business experience. Then you have to worry about third-party tags, because those third-party tags that are put in there, like Google tags and Adobe tags, they will call scripts from third-party sources who may call scripts from other third-party sources or fourth-party sources. You really have to be comprehensive about this.
Yeah, like if people don't get it, if somebody, hacks your Google tag, like you said, they can inject there. So it's all part of it. People don't understand how marketing goes in. They're saying that they want an easy way to inject all type of tracking things. So they're using this technology that allows them to inject stuff. And then, they don't secure it. And the security team may not even be aware of it. And there you go, you're getting hacked. So 2 more questions before we wrap up. I have a lot of questions here, but some of them are very technical.
Can you record those questions and send them to us after?
So
we'll answer.
I'll do that, and I also want later that you guys sort of say how, if you want people to contact you, what's the best way. That would be great, because we can go on for an hour like this. I have many more questions, but
send them to us. We'll take care of it.
We need to wrap up in a second. So 2 more sort of, I would say, thought-provoking, maybe one of them. Is there any advantage from a business marketing perspective to be PCI compliant? Can I use it to my advantage, beyond the security and being compliant? Can you see anything that I can?
Well, if you're a service provider and you're required to be PCI compliant, anybody that is going to use you is going to want your proof that you are compliant. So, and then I offered the example earlier about my client who doesn't really need to be, or 1 extra mile. So there is an advantage to that, and I guess it depends on your business model in the market.
For merchants, it's expected.
But for the MSPs that you guys said that only 10% or so know about it, so this is a huge competitive advantage if you say in the market, we can do or at least we understand PCI, so that's something that I think MSPs should sort of try to market. It's a great selling point, especially if many don't have it. So go ahead and use that for your to get new business. And the last question is, what do you think the future of PCI DSS, where is it going? Anything that you think people should prepare for because it's coming? Where should you invest?
I think the service providers and the banks, because they're the last people that have data left anymore. They're the ones that are gonna get hammered by version 4. The merchants, I mean, the bulk of merchants are P2PE tokenization. They don't have the data anymore.
Yeah.
So they're not the problem. The problem is now with the banks and the service providers, the Squares, those people, because they are still in the loop.
Tokenization companies as well. I mean, they're holding the key to the kingdom. Yeah, they send you back tokens, but they're hosting all of the card data that corresponds to it. So they're targets.
So here is the last question. Just because I know, I'll add one more because I know that it's applicable for many, many merchants. So they're saying if I'm using like Shopify and I have an iframe, for example, with but the payment page is in an iframe hosted by another party, you know. Yeah, talk about that. Just because I think it's a scenario that may apply to many merchants that are using Shopify. Again, I'm using 2 third-party vendors, like,
well, whether it's Shopify or Adobe Magento or any of these services, if it's your merchant ID, it's still your responsibility.
Gotcha.
And Shopify is going to give you an AOC that says they're compliant. And as long as you're using and abiding by everything they tell you to do, you get an SAQA because it's totally outsourced and you're good to go. But you're going to have to go through that SAQA to make sure that, in fact, you are in compliance there.
Gotcha. Okay, cool, guys. This was really interesting. I've learned a few things today, so it was educational for me as well. So thank you very much, all of you, for sharing your wisdom with the rest. We had a lot of users, a lot of questions. I'll send them over to you later as well. So yeah, let's wrap up. If any one of you has like last, words that you want to say, and also how to get in contact with you, if that's something that you want.
Well, I'll go first. I just want to thank you, Gabriel and Wizer, first of all, for being aware of this and actually offering, secure code training, and the fact that you're shining a spotlight on this. I hopefully you'll be incorporating that kind of stuff into your code training as well. But I just want to thank you, folks. It's an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much.
I think a parting shot from me is, guys out there, get your targeted risk assessment started. All right. It isn't mandated until March 31st next year, but 12.2 doesn't exist anymore. After March 31st this year, there is no requirement for an annual risk assessment. So when I come to look at your environment, or somebody else does, they're going to want to see that you did a targeted risk assessment. And these are all about things that involve frequency of actions that you have to do. So I'm not just going to want to see last quarter's bit. Show me more than that you just put it into place before the assessment started. So.
And Lee, if anybody has any question for you, should they look you up on LinkedIn, anywhere else?
Yeah. Look me up on LinkedIn for sure.
So we also have an email address, right, Ben?
Yeah,
you can reach us PCI DreamTeam at Gmail. Send that, go to the team, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And I think at the end of the day, PCI compliance doesn't cost; it pays. So
I love that. I hope people will understand that.
Yeah.
That's a key message. Okay, anyone else? Last, go ahead.
I'm good.
You're good. Okay, guys. Once again, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch, and I'll send you the questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.